Hi guys, this is Lalana. Thanks for tuning into the Sovereign Path. So today we're going to talk about how we're creating our reality, and not only with the twin, but with everything, and having the awareness that, say you have a difficult relationship with the twin, say you have a difficult relationship with your mom, with your brother, with your sister, with your best friend, with your cousin, with a coworker, with any of these things, and you're on an awakening path, and you're shifting, and you're feeling yourself rise, and you're feeling yourself come into neutrality, and you're having all of these shifts, and you're feeling yourself potentially coming out, in and out of inner union as you're starting to anchor this energy. And you're looking over your shoulder and you're wondering, which is very common, and I've spoke about this before, why isn't my twin reflecting this energy back to me yet? Or why isn't my sister reflecting? Or why isn't the job reflecting back? Or why isn't anything reflecting back to me this new energy, these new shifts that I feel that I am making, right? This new energy that I'm stepping into, the self that I am stepping back into, that I am embodying again. Why am I like coming into my higher vibration, my higher awareness, the embodiment of the higher self, but I'm not seeing that in the twin or in this other person or whatever? Or when I'm around the twin, even though I'm starting to embody, neutrality and coming towards inner union, when I'm around the twin, or when I'm around my friends, or when I'm around, any sort of past, what we would perceive as a past person in our life, whether this is family, whether this is friends, why do I still feel like in those moments that a past version of me shows up, right? This is a common theme and a common question, things that I talk about in my one-on-one coaching a lot. So it's this awareness of I'm shifting, and I can feel it, and I know it, and I'm seeing it around me in other situations, right? But when I'm around, like I say, my family, or like a best friend that I've had for 30 years, or my twin, right? I still feel these old aspects of me wanting to come up to the surface, right? So it can be like in some situation of, you've had a strained relationship with your best friend for however long, and you're going through an awakening, and you feel like you're stable, and you feel like you're in your light, and you're holding your ground, and all of these sort of things. But every time you're around your best friend, you feel this past energy of you coming up again. And it's annoying to you, and you're wondering why this is. What's the deal? Why is this not reflecting back to you? And the same thing happens with the twin often, and it can happen with anybody in your life. So the few things that I want to hit on this are, one, when we're still shifting out of our old programs, vibrations, lower density energies, belief systems, and all of these sort of things, there will still be, the residue, the remnants of this past energy as it continues to peel off. I've talked about this a lot. So as you rise, you're going to still see these old energies that are going to need to shed. It doesn't mean that you're falling backwards. It doesn't mean that you've slipped out of inner union or that you've slipped out of neutrality. It just means that as you're taking on your higher vibration, the lower vibratory aspects of you are still shedding. So it can tend to feel like a wave. It can tend to feel like it's going on and off, when it's not really going on and off. It's just your vibration is rising, and so whatever is keeping it from continuing to rise, the lower density energies and fear-based programs, are going to continue to shed. And so they are going to continue to show themselves that we're still here, kind of like we're still here. You don't have to give that a lot of energy anymore, or a lot of story, or any of those things anymore. You just have the awareness, I can feel myself rising into inner union. I can feel myself anchoring. And so I don't need to continue to feed that old energy in that past program, right? I can allow it to leave. So it's the same thing when we're talking about being around, other relationships in our life that potentially have always expected us to behave in certain ways. This ties in a little bit to the video that I did a few days ago about setting self-loving boundaries. And that is that when we've always shown up as a certain version of ourselves with parents or with friends, with loved ones and whatever, and then we're around them again, it tends to bring up that same personality trait or that same pattern or that same theme that we have always known ourselves to be with that person, right? So it's having the awareness that you are shifting out of that version of yourself. That is actually an old energy that you are, it's sort of resurrecting an old aspect of yourself, which is why a lot of times those relationships can start to feel really non-resonant. They can feel really out of alignment. And you can, as I said, question like, wait a second, I'm doing really well. Why do I keep feeling this same energy or this same pattern or this same dynamic when I'm around my family or when I'm around my friend, and also when you're around your twin? That's why it's peeling off, right? So allow it to peel off. But it's also the awareness of that. What is your perception? And this one's really big. What is your perception of that person? What is the belief that you are still holding in regard to how your parents behave, or how your best friend behaves, or how the family dynamic works, or how it worked when you were 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 years old? What is your belief system that's still surrounding all of that? How your twin acts, right? How your twin shows up. Oh, well, my twin is always this, and this, right? Because this is what we've been conditioned to believe, having these interactions with the twin. No different as this is what we've been conditioned to believe, having these interactions with friends and family and loved ones and all of these sort of things. And so that in itself becomes our belief. It becomes a program. It's programmed into the subconscious. And then when we're around those situations, it automatically replays itself, because as I said before, that's what it does. We input the information into the computer, and so the computer just plays the same information. And so when we feel that energy, when we're in those dynamics, we already have an assumption of how that's going to play out, how it's going to feel, what the interaction is going to be like. So this is a two-sided coin, guys, and I want to hit on this today, because when we're talking about having the awareness of when you're expecting that certain people in your life are still going to show up in a certain way, then they will continue to show up in that same exact way, in the same pattern, and it will bring up those old aspects and energetic residue of how you were in those dynamics, right? So in order to shift that, as you are shifting, and you're shifting, and you're feeling you're shifting, right? You're coming into an union, you're in neutrality, whatever it might be, as I said. But if you're still seeing the twin, if you're still seeing your family, if you're still seeing loved ones in the same exact, box that you've been seeing them in for however many years, then that's the only box that they can ever show up to you. It's the only box that they will ever be able to show up to you, because your perception of them is creating the reality that you are seeing. This one was one that we really need to ingest and sit with for a little while, because it can be like one of those difficult things to be like, well, my twin acts like this, my family acts like this, my best friend acts like this, whatever it might be. And so you're saying that I need to just not pay attention to the fact that they're acting that way, and what? Yeah, that's basically exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have belief systems around how people behave based on what we have been programmed to see, believe, think, perceive, the whole thing. I think I just repeated myself. No different than someone else has a belief system about the way that they think that you behave, the way they think that you show up in the world. And so they have put you potentially into some sort of box. It's called a personality, really. And then the ways that my personality may conflict with your personality, or the fact that I don't really like the way that you do this, and you might not like the way that I do that. And so then we start seeing each other through these lenses, through these lights, and we start accepting those aspects of each other, right? Through these lenses and through these lights. All fine and good when you're experiencing the 3D reality of separation, because that's part of your experience. But when you're awakening, when you're coming into the higher consciousness that is you, when you're remembering the true presence that is you, then as I said, all of those programs start to drop. And so when those programs start to show up again in these relationships with the twin, you know, with the past and family members and all of those sort of things. Have the awarenesses is that if you don't see a shift that's going on, that's reflecting back to you, you know, more love, more light, more understanding, whatever that might be, are you still seeing them in the same way that you've always seen them? Are you still expecting them to show up in the same way, in the same dynamic? Because if you are, then that's the only way that they'll ever be able to show up. So if you want to see a change in someone else, then you need to be the change, right? The change starts within you. This is just what it is with every single person in your life. If you want to see a change in the twin, then you need to have a change within you. If you need to see something different, then you need to be something different, right? Because if you're still holding on to this belief system that's saying, well, the twin always does this or always does that, and now you're just believing that that's who they are, then they can't show up differently for you. Even when you're coming into inner union, even if you're anchored in inner union, if you still have the belief that, okay, I'm anchored into inner union, I'm feeling great, you know, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, you have this dominant old energy that's still looking over your shoulder every now and again, wondering when the twin is going to change and wondering like, well, why are they still in their third party relationship? Or why are they still acting like that? Or, you know, why are they still running whatever pattern or program? Or the most classic one is, well, they still need to heal. If you believe that they still need to heal, then you can bet your ass that they're going to keep showing you that they still need to heal, right? Because you believe that. You're the creator of your reality, and so you're creating it. You're creating what you see. And that's a big one, and that's one that we really have to like wrap our head around. It's a difficult one to really like feel into. Wait a second, I'm actually creating this? But you are actually creating it. We all are. We're creating it by what we see, what we believe, what we perceive, what we think to be is true, right? And so this is a lot of times when I say things like, when you're coming into inner union, don't always be looking over your shoulder to look and see like, are they doing this and are they doing that and are they doing whatever? Because most of the time we're looking over our shoulder and we're seeing like, basically we're being like, have they changed, right? I want to see a change. I want to see some sort of a change within you because I've changed, and so I need to see a change within you. But have the awareness that if you're coming into inner union, that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But if your thought about how the masculine has done this or that, not done that or whatever hasn't changed, then you're still holding them in a box. You're still holding them in that reality, and they won't be able to break free from that reality because you're creating it for them. I know that's a big one. I know that's a mind bender. I know that's a trigger for probably a lot of people. But it's the same thing as if you're having a difficult situation with a parent over and over and over again, and you know that you've risen in consciousness, you're awakened, you're in your I am presence most of the time, you're feeling really good most of the time, but then somehow you still are having this same sort of old energetic dynamic with a family member. And you're still trying to wrap your head out around, why am I still having this same energetic interaction with my family member, even though I feel really amazing in every other aspect of my life? In that moment, you need to ask yourself, how are you still seeing that family member and the relationship that you have with them? Is it still based on a past belief and a past perception of how the dynamic between you and your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or your cousin has always played out? Because if you're still expecting your relationship to look the same way it's always looked, then it doesn't matter how grounded or aware that you think you are if you're still holding this aspect of that connection in your mind in some sort, of a negative light, or in any sort of just cage that's saying this is the way it's always looked. And so since this is the way it's always looked, then this is the way it's always going to look. And so that means it's always going to be X, Y, and Z. And so you're wondering why it's not shifting, because you're shifting and you're in your inner union and you're feeling really amazing, but there's still this one little tweak in your life that doesn't seem to be changing. And in that case, and it happens with the twin as well. In that case, you need to ask yourself, am I holding this person? Am I holding this relationship in a box, in a cage, based on something that I haven't released, right? Because if you're still thinking that, you know, the twin does all of these things, then that means that there's a belief that you still have running that is saying, this is the only way that I see you. It's the only way that I've ever seen you. It's the only way that I can see you. And so as per reality, as within, so without, it's the only way they'll ever be able to show up in your life. So I've said in other videos, and like, you can do this with anybody in your life. You can do it with anybody in your life. This is a twin flame channel at this point. So mostly I'm talking about that, but you know, when we're saying like, I need you to show up like this, you know, I need you to do this. And I did another video on this that's saying like, oh, well, the twin is showing up in this way and this way and this way. And so since you're showing up in that way and it's not the way that I want you to show up, then in order for you, you know, to have access to me or whatever, then you need to show up in all of these other certain ways. Well, if that's coming from an egoic program of believing that that's always the way that they're going to show up, then they're never going to be able to show up in a different way. And so you're moving from a 3D program again. You're not moving from your sovereignty, right? You're not moving from higher awareness. And if you want to see the masculine in their divinity, if you want to see like someone in your family in their divinity in a different light, then you need to start giving them the opportunity to show up in their divinity and in their different light, right? The same way that you're showing up in your divinity. So have that awareness is that if you come into those interactions and you're automatically having the assumption that that interaction is going to play out the same way it always plays out, then you are already moving into that interaction with your old energy. And if you're moving into that interaction with that old energy, feeling like, well, I already know how this is going to play out because it's always played out like this, then they cannot meet you in a different energy. They have to meet you in the same energy that you just showed up as. Does that make sense? And the twin is the same. If you have this belief that the twin always shows up in this certain way, whatever it might be, and you're coming into an interaction with them physically, and you're coming in with that energy, even if you're saying, well, I hope that it's not going to be the same energy, and I really believe and I really know that it's going to change. But as I said in that video I did last week, the dominant energy prevails. So if it's still going on within your thought system and it's the more dominant energy, then you're bringing that energy into that conversation, into that interaction. And so they're going to meet the energy that you just brought, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's a little clearer. I know that that's not an easy thing to do. And I've said in tons of my videos, this is not an easy path to walk. I understand that. There's no way to sugarcoat that. It's a hard path to walk. It's a simple path as far as the principles of how to do this, but it can be very challenging and, you know, coming face to face and up front with all of the shadows and the unconscious patternings and all of those sort of things. And then also taking responsibility for our own beliefs and also taking responsibility for our own perceptions and our own programs and all of those sort of things. So keep in mind that as I've said in a lot of my examples, you're shifting out of the 2012, you know, Mac or Windows. You're shifting out of that program. If you're going through a spiritual awakening, and you will be if you're a twin flame, because that's what this is, then that program that used to run so well is literally deleting. It's not being able to boot up in the same way. You're shifting into the 2026, 2027, 2028 Mac, Windows, and on and on and on, right? Your operating system is changing, it's shifting. And so when your operating system is changing and shifting, that means if you're still leaning back, as I've said before, and you're trying to plug in that 2012 version, and you keep thinking like the twin dynamic with you is still running off that 2012 version, or the relationship with your parents or your loved ones is still running off that 2012 version, even though you really feel like you're shifting into the 2026 version, then you will feel your energy literally get yanked back, right? Whenever you're in a dynamic with them. Anybody that has felt that knows what I mean. It's sort of like, I'm feeling really good, I'm in my energy, I'm in my sovereignty, I'm in my I am presence, I feel great, and then suddenly I come around my twin or some other sort of situation, and I literally feel like my energy just got yanked down, right? And so you need to ask yourself in those moments, before you even get into that interaction, prepare yourself. Am I coming in with the old energy? Am I coming in with the past version of how this dynamic has played out? Or am I coming in my sovereignty now? Am I coming in with love? Am I coming in my I am presence, and in the way that my I am presence is expressing itself, which is through love, which is through joy, which is through abundance, which is through authenticity? Am I expressing myself in that way in this dynamic with my loved ones, with my parents, with my friends, with my twin? Or am I coming in with that same energy of fear and of scarcity and of, assumption and thinking that things aren't going to go well, or the pattern always runs, and so I'm just expecting to see that pattern? Because again, if we're showing up with that same energy, then the person that you're interacting with has no choice but to show up in that same energy as well, because you are creating the entire dynamic, right? So hopefully that helps you guys. I know that can be overwhelming to hear and a bit of a mind bender. And just know that when you're ready to receive that information, it will hit, it will resonate, it will feel aligned. But I understand that there are some wobbly moments on this path that can feel confronting and frustrating, and all of those sort of things. I'm going to do another video. I've had a few people in my coaching talking about this sort of stuff, but this aspect that I'm talking about in this video is really what we're talking about, is like stepping in and owning the light that is you, and owning the creation that you are, owning the spark of creation that you are, and starting to like grab that by the reins and create through your heart space, through your open heart space. Start creating again through your I am presence. That's so much of what this awakening path is bringing us back into the remembrance that we are in the driver's seat, that we've always been in the driver's seat, that we've always been creators, that we've always been creating. It's just we were creating while we were in a sleeping state in the separation consciousness for so long, but we were still creating that. We were still creating all of that. And that was wonderful for the experience, no matter how shitty it may seem to the ego, for the higher self and the expansion and the growth that the higher self, was looking for, having the separation experience. So you've always been a creator. You just forgot in order for you to have those experiences. Now you're going through the awakening, and you're coming to back into the remembrance that you're the creator, right? That you're the creator of things. And so as you're coming back into that remembrance, as you're going through this path, it will become more and more resonant, right? Even if the words don't necessarily make sense to the mind, more and more you'll be able to feel the vibratory resonance of the truth that, yeah, I am actually creating this. And if I look back, I can actually see how I've been creating things based on patterns and beliefs without me even being aware of that. And so when you become more and more aware of that, you'll start to like have the realization that when your belief changes, when your perception changes, that's when everything around you changes as well. But when you're coming in with an old energy and an old version of self that you're hoping to drop, or that you're not really wanting to interact with anymore with the twin or with anyone else, you have to have the awareness that that is the energy that is going to be reflected back to you. So just sort of be with, as I said, how am I coming into this interaction? How am I seeing the twin? Am I holding the twin in this lower vibration? Am I holding them in this old story and this old narrative? Because if I'm continually holding them in this old wounded masculine, gotta heal, gotta awaken, gotta get your shit together, gotta do all of this sort of stuff, blah, 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 then that's the only way that they can show up. But if you're seeing them in their divinity, in their light, in the true higher masculine, the higher essence of the masculine that they actually are, then they will start showing up in that light. No different than as you have been shifting into inner union, and you shifted out of the woundings and out of, you know, the patterns and the programs that you were running, and now you're shifting into inner union, and suddenly you're standing in your light, right? And you believed in yourself the whole time, hopefully, that you were going through this process. And if you're not, I hope that you are continuing to believe in yourself and to believe in the truth of what you are as the I Am Presence, as the higher self, as beauty, as grace, as love, as reverence, as a creator being. As you're believing in yourself and your ability to continue to keep going on this path, believe in the twin in the same way. Believe in them in the same way, right? Believe in your family in the same way. Right? Start shifting that belief, and that's the belief that you're going to start seeing, right? Start moving from that heart space and seeing people, you know, in the light, and instead of seeing them in the past version of how you think things are going to play out, in the past version of, you know, how you're afraid that this is going to look, and all of these sort of things. Shift that up, move that up. So that's what I have for you guys. I hope that you have an awesome day.